Hello, everyone. It's Andrew. I'm here live. I guess you knew that. But I'm here for a very special conversation with Congressman Ro Khanna from California. And he's one of the co sponsors of the Emergency Money for the People Act. And so we're going to have a real convo about what the heck is going on with this act. Where did you go? I saw him. He's trying to get away from me. Where did he go? Where did you go? Bum, 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 bum. That's where he went. He is coming on Instagram. Da 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 da.
All
There.
right.
Hey, Ro, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing better for seeing you, brother. We can't wait for you to make sense of what the heck is going on in Congress for everybody.
Well, I don't know if anyone can make sense of or what's not going on in Congress. I mean, Andrew, you've been pushing from the time of your campaign, obviously, for more money for people, working class families, and a monthly payment. Then we have this pandemic. The economy crashes. There's sort of a consensus in March or April that we're going to need monthly checks. And we proposed this, not just Tim Ryan and me, but Sanders and Kamala and a large, Mitt Romney starts talking about it. This was in March. And all we've had is one stimulus check go out. It's incomprehensible, the disconnect between this country's needs and the institution of Congress.
Well, so you're on the inside, and for folks who don't know, let me introduce Ro a little bit. So he's the member of Congress from essentially Silicon Valley. You could say that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Worked
They
in
love you out there.
worked in the Obama administration, and endorsed Bernie and served as, I want to say, you were like his national co-chair, right?
I was one of them. Yeah. Yeah. And my good friend Evan Lowe was your co-chair, right?
Yeah, that's right. So how many national co-chairs were there? What are we talking about? Were there like
No, no,
two?
there were only four of us. There were four of us. It was Nita Turner, myself, Ben Cohen of the famous Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and Carmen Cruz, the mayor of Puerto Rico in Puerto Rico.
Wow, what a great group to be affiliated with. So was there like Ben and Jerry's anytime you guys had any kind of gathering?
There was a promise of Ben and Jerry's. I don't know if Ben actually delivered, but his nickname was the Minister of Ice Cream. And they do it would be an interesting warm up routine to Bernie, because usually it'd be Ben Cohen. Cornel West would often come, and Cornel is a brilliant speaker if you haven't heard him. And then of course Nina Howard warmed up, and so it was fun. Those rallies were great.
So when there was this program, where did you fall? Were you somewhere in the middle of the openers? Like,
I was
your
at
role?
the, like, let's not bore people part of it. Okay, now we got to get someone. All right, we'll come in with some facts. All right, get them off. Get the professor off before we lose the crowd. But I was in there. They had me in there. What were your rallies like? I mean, you didn't need the All Star lineup to get your thousands of people, or how were your rallies?
Well, it was not like Bernie needed any help either in that regard. But they varied very much by where we were, but it was often yang leaders and activists who were there because they were doing the work wherever we were. So that was a lot of fun. It was folks who were really active on the ground for the campaign.
Let me say this. I want to get your take on it, because at a philosophical level, I think you and Bernie Sanders were saying something similar. I mean, obviously you have your disagreements, but you were saying, look, people in 2016 voted for change because they were upset with what was going on, that there was a lot of things that weren't working about our country. And we need to acknowledge that frustration and offer some understand that we can't just go back to normal. We just can't go back to the status quo. Talk about that a little bit, and whether you think that has been internalized yet by the Democratic Party or not.
Wow. You're really getting in there, Ro. Yeah, I think that most Americans at this point just are fed up, just really just sick and tired. And the dysfunction you described in Congress is a big part of it. It's like if you look around and say, look, if 55% of us are for universal basic income and something like 76% are for cash relief during the pandemic, what's the holdup? It's like, isn't that the job, just to do what the people want? But better than anyone else watching this what the job really is, and so we'd
Mhm.
love to hear from you the reality. So I think people are fed up, and Bernie gave voice to that anger. Trump gave voice to that anger. I gave voice to that reality. I'm not necessarily like the angriest guy most of the
But
time.
you gave it with aspiration. I thought that was the interesting part, right? I mean, you were saying, look, I loved your slogan, math, or let's figure out what the new jobs are. Let's figure out what the new reality is. I think, but you were acknowledging the same underlying structural problems.
Yeah, the distress that people have. And so, from your perspective, Ro, like you're one of the, let's say, call it several hundred most powerful people in the country politically. I mean, you've already done
I
something.
don't know about that, but I certainly have more voice by being in. I mean, it's an honor to be a member of Congress. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I at least, please tell me if this is right or wrong. So you ran for Congress, won, which in itself is incredible because you ran against I want to say an incumbent,
I
and so
did.
defeating an incumbent not easy, and then you get in there, and now you're a member of Congress. You're co-chair of the Bernie campaign. You have a real voice. You clearly are for cash relief. You proposed this emergency money for the people bill in March or April or whenever it was. And my sense of things is that you get there, and then there's this massive hierarchy in your own party, Democratic
Yes.
Party. Yeah. And so you look up, and how many Democratic members of Congress are there?
There are about 230.
Yeah. So you're one of 230.
Yes.
And there are different points of view, and you have the leadership, and then you have the Republican members of Congress on the other side, and you're looking up saying, okay, like, I have a sense as to what we should be doing, but this institution is not designed to necessarily make the changes or pass the laws or implement the solutions. Like, it's designed um, for a log jam or for dysfunction. And I was talking to a guy named Lawrence Lessig, who you probably know, actually.
Oh, I love Lawrence. Yeah,
Yeah, Lawrence. But he talked about it as like a vetocracy, where you can't get anything done, I can't get anything done, but I can keep you from getting anything done.
yeah.
Like that's the system. Is that a reasonable description as someone who's on the inside?
It is. I mean, I think it's much easier to kill things than it is to propose things. But I think it's a bigger problem, and that is that your power in Congress is very much based on relationships, right? So let's start with some basic facts. Incumbents usually win re-election 98% of the time. Now, maybe it's 90% these days because we've had some insurgent candidates who won, but it's still about 90%. For every AOC or Cory Bush, there 90% of the other races where the incumbent wins and you never hear about it. So if incumbents win 98%, that means once you're in Congress, you probably can stay in Congress a pretty long time. Now, how do you get power in Congress? Well, you have to convince your colleagues to vote for you, right? That's how you get into leadership or into positions. Well, who's going to have the best chance of convincing people to vote for them? The people who've been in Congress the longest time, because they're the ones who've been with the other members of Congress. So if you've been in Congress 20, 30 years, you probably know 150, 160 of these members of Congress. So what you have is actually institutional static, basically a governing institution that is being governed by people who won 20, 30 years ago, catering to people who won 10 to 15 years ago. And they actually hold the power in the institution. And you have all this new blood coming in saying 55% of the people are for something or 60% of the people are for something. But that has no currency if you can't get the votes in Congress, which is being governed by people who won elections in the 80s and 90s. So in some ways, it's not like the Supreme Court where you have people appointed 10, 20 years before, but it's not exactly democratic either. And I think the anti-democratic character of these institutions it probably isn't understood enough, that it's so seniority based.
Wow, that was a great description. And these are, folks that you um, share the party with. I mean, there's like a whole parallel structure on the other side, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and it's actually not even necessarily their fault, right? Like it could be like if I don't plan to stay in Congress for 20 years, but my guess is if I stayed in Congress for 20 years, it could be that I'd be like totally out of touch with the next generation of people coming in. And I'm looking at the world from my perspective, and I've got all these friends of mine, like Tim Ryan and others. And so I'm now a powerful person in Congress, but by the time I become powerful, I'm disconnected from the modern reality. So the reason I say this is yes, we need campaign finance reform. Yes, we need institutional reform. Yes, no lobbyists. But there's something about the structure itself that has to be changed, and something about the seniority system itself that has to be changed. Now, look, the counter argument to that is in the African American community in particular, a lot of folks until recently they couldn't win statewide. The only place they had a power was in Congress, and so they won and they paid their dues, and now they've been there 20 years, and you're going to say finally they've reached a position of influence, and you're going to take that away. So these are difficult issues, but the bottom line is it is an institutional hierarchy being dominated by people who aren't out there in the current moment.
Well, Ro, we're going to get to what we can do to help you push cash relief, but I don't know if you heard my proposal for this situation. My proposal is term limits,
I
but
thought,
but current legislators are exempt.
you
And
know,
then, so you can get everyone to pass it being like, well, it doesn't affect me. It'll affect whoever comes after me. And then eventually then you'd wind up with like a very different looking legislature. So and it's incredible that you just jumped up and said you're for it, even before you heard my giant.
well, I'm for Beto O'Rourke and I were the only two people in one of the Congresses who supported term limits, and if this was when Beto was in Congress, and your version is I think more likely to get through, which is grandfather in the people. But traditionally, Democrats have been opposed to term limits, and Republicans have been opposed to campaign finance reform, and so you have this impasse. But anyone looking at Congress, if you're not for some of these structural reforms, we're not going to get major change absent someone like a Bernie Sanders. I mean, obviously I'm biased, or someone like that winning a sweeping majority that in an FDR like mandate. But that would require not just, let's say, Bernie Sanders had won, but would Bernie Sanders have carried a sweeping majority in Congress and the Senate? So absent something like that, there needs to be institutional change.
There needs to be institutional change, brother. Because one of the things and I would certainly appreciate the fact that you went to bat and fought for Bernie in the way you did. I was a Berner in 2016. I think
Oh, you were? I didn't know that. Yeah.
yeah. I got the text messages because I was on the 2016 list, and so it was pretty funny. I was like candidate for president. I was getting messages. I mean, not that they know. I mean, who the heck knows? Andrew Yang.
Well, you're probably one of the few presidential candidates who actually was able to check them yourself and understand how the apps worked and use them yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah,
didn't have to go through staff. I'm sure all the other presidents.
I definitely handle my own device. So I agree with you on the institutional change part. The fact you supported Bernie and had that vision, because I can sense you had that vision of like the sweeping mandate, like I think is glorious, because that's one way that change could have occurred, and reforming the institutions to me actually now is going to be one of my new areas of focus, FYI, because I realize that it's impossible to pass universal basic income unless you reform the institutions, unless you have democracy reform, ranked choice voting, term limits preferably, in my opinion. But the reality is the reality that we have right now. So what can we do to help beat the drum for cash relief right now? Because there are so many people that you and I know need it badly, and Congress. So why is it that Congress can't come to the table, and what can people do?
I think we need more Democrats on board with it. I mean, this is where, I mean, if you look at the bill.
I'm flabbergasted that not every Democrat's on board with you and Tim and AOC and everyone else. So sorry because I completely agree. It's crazy. Go on, continue.
Yeah, and I mean, this idea that, it costs too much money, etc. We're spending trillions of dollars. The Fed, here's the other thing I don't understand. The Fed has total jurisdiction to buy up junk bonds. They have jurisdiction to lend to corporations and to banks. And no, people say, well, it's a low inflationary environment, low interest rate environment, so we'll allow the Fed to do that. And no one talks about deficits then. Suddenly, when it comes to giving money to average, ordinary people, then deficits become an issue. And we know the economics of it, that people will spend it, it'll create more jobs. But the point is that we have no chance of this until you can at least get the Democrats on board. So how do you get the leadership to take it seriously? We need at least 100, 150 co-sponsors of the legislation, whether it's, Tim Ryan in my bill or whether it's Bernie and Kamala's bill. I mean, we need to get the Democrats, and that means organizing in communities. I mean, I'd love to get some moderate Republicans, but at least let's start with the Democrats. We don't have. I'll tell you a good example of this: the Justice and Policing Act that Karen Bass did a phenomenal job to lead, which has some real reforms. Right? It's not just weak. It's actually substantive.
Yeah, it's good. It was good.
Yeah, it has a change of the standard of force. My bill, which was included in that, which would change the standard of force, had 20 co-sponsors. And was basically considered dead on arrival, and now was passed the entire House of Representatives. Now, that was obviously because of the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd and the mass movements, but it can show you how culture can change, how it actually led to this bill passing the House. Now, it's stuck in the Senate, but I think it's much more likely now to become law, especially if we win, or at least a part of it. So that's to say, if there is mobilization, you can break through, but it requires something of the order of the mobilization we saw with George Floyd to change that conversation.
So how many co-sponsors in the House are there right now?
Last I checked, there were around 50 to 60. I mean, it was in between.
Wow. So we're only, let's call it, a few dozen away from this being like a major consideration.
Yeah, no, I think the 100 is usually the magic number, and some of the people could get, they're just indifferent to it. But, I don't want to call out names on this about people who got on because of constituent pressure, but let me tell you that some of them did. So I'm sure the Yang Gang and others have talked to people, and the organizing matters. And look, if we're all human, if I were to hear from 30 real people, not bots, not, but people I thought were legitimate from my district saying they're organizing around a particular issue, I would take it seriously. The other thing to understand psychologically is every member of Congress is paranoid. They far overestimate their chances of losing than they actually have of losing. And so, that's to people's activist advantage. I mean, if you show up and say there are a lot of people who care about this in the district, people will listen.
I love it, bro. Let's do it. Let's organize, activate, and notify our members of Congress, starting with the Democrats, to say, look, why don't you get on board Tim and Rose bill? Because if you do, we'll love you more. And if you don't, we're going to end up helping whoever runs against you. I mean, it's a fairly reasonable argument.
Well, look, you want to, I can't call on people to lobby, but people can organize on issues. But you won the intellectual argument, right? I mean, which I think people who are watching, who are your supporters, should know. I don't think there would have been Tim Ryan in my bill for emergency cash assistance if there was not Andrew Yang's presidential campaign. I don't think people would have been talking about it. I mean, I'm not saying that to flatter you, or I could say other things to flatter you. I think that's just a fact, right? And people may not be for your vision long term, but in terms of even affecting the debate on emergency and saying, look, let's get cash assistance, then you did that. So you won the intellectual debate. I think that's probably 50%. Now we have to win the institutional debate, right? How do you get something that has currency to actually become law? And, that's equally hard.
I love it. No, this is an organizing challenge, which just about everything comes down to at the end of the day. So if you're watching this and you think that Rose Emergency Money for the People Act is a great idea, which it is, I believe the main thrust is $2,000 for most people per month for the duration of the pandemic. You need to figure out who your member of Congress is, figure out whether they're already a co-sponsor on this bill. What's the number of this bill? Is it 40-40?
I should know the number. It's just the Emergency Relief Act, but we can put it up on our social media afterwards. I'll have on our
Yeah,
Instagram.
we'll post it. It used to be my pinned tweet. It was literally until like last week.
So you've been great on it. I mean, you've helped really give voice to it. But I think your candidacy shows the impact actually that ideas can still make, right? I mean, no one in Congress was talking about a monthly check, and no one was talking about that until you came along. And you didn't know, obviously, that there was going to be, unfortunately, a pandemic and a great downturn. But the fact that you had prepared the country for that mattered. And part of your campaign was preparing this country for the future, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So it's one of the, I think, least appreciated part of politics. People think it's all about charisma, and obviously it helps, or all about connecting and pop culture. Actually, it's a lot about it, ideas. You can actually, with good ideas, still make an incredible difference in the country. And I think our country's hungry for ideas. I think they're tired of the sloganeering. I think they get that things haven't been working. They get that the middle class and working class have been left out, and they want real solutions. They know that all the solutions may not be good, but they at least want something new, something that's concrete.
And they want a Congress that will actually move things across the finish line, and
Yeah.
especially in a time of historic crisis. So contact your members of Congress. If you have friends in your district, organize and say, look, let's just get them to co-sponsor this bill. This is going to be, unfortunately, front and center still while we're in the midst of this pandemic and the associated recession/depression. There's another shoe to drop on both sides. Like the pain is still unfolding in our communities, in our economy, unfortunately. But there's also going to be a shoe to drop in Congress where everyone thinks there's going to be another stimulus at some point. The Republicans and Democrats have not come together on terms just yet. So this is a massive window of opportunity, really, or a massive period of need. So if we can get Roe and Tim and AOC and others, another few dozen co-sponsors, then this can become a centerpiece of the stimulus conversation right when the sides come back together. And so if you're watching this and want to help make this happen, please do reach out to your member of Congress, maybe get a few people together, maybe create like a cool social media account like District 16 in Illinois for universal basic income, and then it'll seem very official. And then your member of Congress will be like, "What? There's a whole group around this thing. What's going on?" So let's get Roe and company the reinforcements they need.
Well, I appreciate that, Andrew, and I appreciate the mobilization around the idea. And the other thing is that obviously it can be part of our negotiation once Congress comes back. It can also, hopefully, in a Biden administration, be front and center of what we're going to need to do in a new administration on economic stimulus. I mean, this pandemic isn't going to be behind us, unfortunately, I don't think, for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, we have so much digging to do, my friend. And even the optimistic case means that we'll have our work cut out for us and then some. But thank you for being one of the true champions of the people, one of the good guys of politics, one of the folks who's in it for the right reasons, like a genuine patriot and servant of the public. You've always been one of my favorite members of Congress, even since before the run. You were always like the sensible one with a true sense of the 21st century. Maybe it's because you represent the area you do.
Well, the admiration is very much mutual, and I've said this to you in private, but happily to say it again publicly. I mean, your run for president was trailblazing, and on so many levels. I don't think the biggest part was being Asian American or what you did for the Asian American community. I think the biggest part was having a coherent vision of preparing our country for the challenges of the technology revolution. I appreciate very much your vision and your work.
Well, thank you, brother. Ro, this is just the second or 18th of many conversations that you and I will have. Thank you for everything you do to fight for us. And yeah, we'll do everything we can to help. And you and I will be fast friends and companions in this fight, because we're both parents. We like, we got to do everything we can to leave this country in, frankly, at this point, acceptable condition for the generations to follow.
Well, I look forward to working for many years to come, Andrew.
You too, Ro. I'm sorry, man. You might have to stay in Congress forever. No, I'm kidding. Bye, Yang Gang. We'll put the information up. I'll stick it up on my Twitter feed, and follow Ro Khanna. As you can tell, he's one of the good ones. He's there for the right reasons, and he's fighting for us.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye, Yang Gang.
Thank you.